Well, hi. It's good to see you in person. It's good to be after, what is it?
2 weeks?
10 days?
10 days?
10 days of not being around people. It's really good to be around people today. I still have a sore throat. I'm still not doing great, but I am maintaining a very far social distance from everyone. We have a confirmed not COVID test. It's on my phone if anybody needs the proof. But I really wanted to chat, and I really wanted to see you, and I really want to get through our book. So we are going to meet today. We are continuing with Tongue Pierced by Nelson Searcy?
Searcy, I think.
Okay, and we are on chapter 5, which means by the time we are done this chapter, we are over halfway through our book tonight. It's going to be good. I've got my water right here. Water helps. And tonight's chapter is called The Language of Love. And I had some expectations going into this chapter. I was expecting something to be a throw to the Christian book by Chapman. I can't think of Chapman's first name. The 5 Love Languages. That's what I was expecting from this chapter. Not what this chapter was about. And a great summary of the chapter. I'm just going to read his concluding thought on the last page of the chapter to give you an insight to where this chapter is going. Communicating clearly with love is foundational to living a tongue-pierced life. You get to play a defining role in the quality of relationships in your life through the words you speak. If your marriage isn't the best, your words can turn it around for the better. If your relationship with your children isn't where you want it to be, some intentional tweaking of the communication skills you have can work wonders. Don't take that power for granted. Make decisions to communicate clearly with love in every important relationship in your life. Over time, you'll be amazed what happens as a result. Hi, Mom. Welcome. Hi. Good to see you. So this language of love is recognizing that every relationship we have, from our next door neighbor to our spouse, to children, to family members of any kind, any relationship is hinged on the method of communication we have, the quality of our communication. And he words it this way: relationship problems are, by and large, communication problems. I will agree. I read this book and I agree with 95% of what he's saying, because he's making some very concrete general statements. And then I can think, yeah, communication is the core of all of our relationship problems. But a lot of our problems come sometimes down to one side or the other, or both being selfish or prideful or unforgiving. Like there is another element. So there are times where I definitely disagree with him in that sense. He's putting all the emphasis on language and the communication, and I agree with him. I recognize the one thing that he misses is a relationship is a two-way communication. In my marriage, I talk to Alex. Alex talks to me. Hi, Alex.
Hello.
And it goes both ways. The quality of my communication enhances our relationship, and the quality of his communication with me enhances our relationship. It's both of us together working on that. And there's a nuance of that is missing in this chapter. Me working on being more loving in my language will improve our relationship. But if one side in a relationship chooses not to change, not to listen, you can do everything right. You can be as Christ-like as you humanly possibly can. And the relationship still might be a broken relationship because of where that other person is. So you can only own your side of the street, or your share of the building of the relationship. And I think that's important. The reason I'm saying all of this is I've been in too many relationships where I have started feeling guilty because things didn't improve, and I would read something like this and go, well, if I just work harder, if I just try harder, if I just pray more, if I just and God gives that person free will to choose to change. And in the story of the rich young ruler, Jesus told that young man, here's what you need. And he walked away sad because he walked away. Jesus didn't chase after him. The man walked away. So I'm putting this at the front. This is the piece that you can own in a relationship. Here are the choices and changes you can make in your communication. And it will improve your life because it will help you in every relationship. But not every relationship gets fixed because it's not just you involved. Is that like, I was really nitpicky on this one because of that piece of it. Yeah, there's a book out there, and I like the author. Have a New Kid by Friday, and it's a great parenting book. There's a lot of really great tips and tools, but your child's still going to be a child. So, okay, relationship problems are by and large communication problems, and this is true. Thinking of like there's miscommunication. We were talking even just Pastor Thomas referenced either just to me or in a sermon. I don't remember when he said this, but the idea that in any given situation, there's what your brain's trying to work through, the words you say, the words they're saying out loud, and the words in the other person's head. And the words I'm saying and the words they might be saying are not matching because we're missing the intent behind the words, the secondary, lots of miscommunication, even just humorous things. A couple months ago, it's right before we moved in July, I had this big miscommunication where we were moving in 2 weeks on a Friday, and I had said the date a few times, but the person we were talking to that was going to help was convinced we were moving that Friday. And so we'll see you Friday. I'm like, yes, in 2 weeks on Friday. Oh yes, so tomorrow on Friday. No, like there was just this like, it would have been perfect in a comedy. Communication. The people in relationships usually fall into two. Okay, sorry. This makes more sense if I write one more sentence back. You've known that these people, maybe you're one yourself. The ones who trudge in on a state of discontent long after thoughtful words have gone by the wayside. They continue to go through the motions of relationship. So think about, I now remember the scenario. So he talks about healthy relationships are built on communication. He sets up a scenario when he was first married. He and his wife were in a restaurant and they were chatting, and there was this other couple that came in, sat down gloomily, ordered their food, ate in silence, got up and left, and the couple never talked to each other. And he's like, how do you get from, I want to stay up and talk till 4 a.m. with you every night to, I never want to say a word to you? What happens in somebody's life to get you to these extremes, or we can't even speak? People in these relationships usually fall into one of two predictable categories. Either they have nothing to say to each other, or everything they say is filled with disdain. Everything they say is negative. The quality of every relationship in your life will rise or fall based on the quality of the communication within the relationship. Life-giving communication, I like that instead of tongue-pierced communication. Life-giving, the way to be a blessing, and it's biblical. He doesn't have the verse reference, and I don't know it. But Jesus says, like, speak the truth in love. Speak the truth in love. So life-giving communication in your relationships, thirst for these three things. Communication, communicate clearly with love. And he has each of these as three separate ideas. So ultimately, our goal in every relationship is to communicate clearly with love. Think of the three separate elements of communicating clearly with love as stepping stones to build on each other, creating pathways to healthier relationships. When you embrace them, your relationships will move to new realms. Let's dig into some specifics. So we're going to do that today. Are you looking up that verse?
The verse is Ephesians 4:15.
Okay, so Jesus didn't say it. Paul wrote it.
Instead, speaking the truth in love.
Speaking the truth in love. And it's that hard place of churches often get accused of this. You either have the truth or you have the love. So there are loving churches that meet the needs but don't necessarily speak out like evangelistically or confronting sin, and they are the love churches. And then you have like often holiness churches that get very much into the scriptures and are accurate and miss the heart of Jesus. And what Christ wants us to do is walk that thin line between the two, as to be loving and truthful. And it's hard. It's hard to be straightforward and honest and upfront, tell somebody you're doing it wrong, or like confront them when there's an error, and be loving at the same time. I at least I find that a challenge.
Yeah. There's like I think of.
You need to speak up just slightly more.
Yes, sorry. Well, I was thinking of another talk I'd seen about that, and discussing the differences between how Jesus spoke to people when you look at the Gospels. And in certain cases, he spoke with love and forgiveness, and in other cases, he spoke with truth. So you look at the case of the stoning of the woman, where he forgives her, but then tells her to now repent of her sins. So recognizing that she had made a mistake, she needs to now repent, and that was the truth of it. But at the same time, also saying you have been forgiven, and sending the people with the stones away, an act of love.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that. So communicate. This is that first stepping stone. Most basic level of relationships is to make the effort to communicate. Thinking about how many broken relationships have you listened to, even if it's just in books and things of, well, we haven't talked in 40 years. I haven't talked to my parents in 10 years. It works in novels and television and movies because there are people who have those relationships. It's that couple in the thing. They just stopped talking. Basic communication. Communicate clearly. As you communicate, keep clarity in mind. So many relationship problems happen not because people aren't talking, but because they speak two different languages. You have intention about what you say and how you say it. And even just defining what you're saying, like, yes. And then communicate clearly with love. Finally, bathe the communication in love. You can also communicate words of life as clearly and easily as you can communicate words of death. If you want to have relationships that bring joy and confidence to you and the people closest to you, make sure everything you communicate is filled with love, which might mean starting with praying for the person if love has left you. Like if you have stopped being able to love. I gave the example of the pastor a couple weeks ago who was praying for some people who had hurt him in the church, and he didn't feel love for them. And somehow the praying didn't change them. It changed the pastor. It changed him. Sometimes the answer to our prayers is God changing us and our perspective. Okay. He uses the rest of the book to look at two types of relationships. And I don't think these are the only type of relationships, but he looks at marriages and children. We can interpret that, like you can take these three stepping stones into any form of relationship. But he specifically has marriages in mind and children. And so the first one is under marriage. So we're going to talk marriage and go through each of the three stepping stones, and then we'll talk children and go through the three stepping stones. And we could do that with every relationship that matters. Siblings, colleagues that we care about, members in our church family. And I think that's important because miscommunication, poor communication is often at the root of major things that happen and destroy relationships in church families and in Bible studies and with neighbors. And so even though we're only looking at marriage and children, because that's what he's doing, this goes across the board. This was a startling fact. So, yes, I'm just going to read it. The average married couple spends 4 minutes alone together a day. In a week, that's a whopping 28 minutes. And I'm thinking this is probably pre-pandemic. This book was, well, we got it before the pandemic. So that statistic is from sometime before 2015. So the stats might have changed, but if you're trying to build a relationship on 28 minutes a week, especially when you think of some of my good friends in Nova Scotia, that they're like that. Yeah, we've been married 20 years, but the last 8, I'm doing my job, they're doing this job. One's driving the kids here, one's driving the kids there. We're like ships in the night, passing. We're better, like we're roommates. That's what has become of our relationship. And watching relationships like that, the children are now into their late teens, and the couple is going, what do we have in common now? What do we even have to talk about? So his first step is, if this is your family, if this is your life, or even if you're starting out like Alex and I are, he strongly suggests, and I like this, I have friends who do this, is scheduling a regular date night. And it doesn't have to be like romantic candlelight and dinner and going to a movie. Intentionally choosing that every Wednesday night we are going to do something together. It helps. It gives you things to do. For Alex and I, we make sure we have a walk together, and that even when we've spent the whole day working in the same house, cooking a meal together, so much happens, so much improves our day by chatting at night. Would you not? Would you? Thank you for agreeing with me. Is that your experience as well?
Yes.
Because that's when we dream, we share about things that we hadn't necessarily thought about. It's a very turning together. I know, like, 2 of my friends that lived here, and I was babysitting before they moved to PEI. Every week wasn't possible based on their schedule, but they made sure to have a monthly date night. And one time, what it was they made picnic lunches, and they drove from into the city. They went to the Parliament buildings, and there's a walking trail behind them. They just had their picnic, watched the sunset, took a walk, and then came back. That was their romantic date night. But it was the perfect date night for them because it gave them a chance to talk and chat and be together. If you guys like board games, sitting down and playing a board game together, specifically maybe like a cooperative game where you have to work together to solve a problem. There's these great games called exit games, giving you ideas on what type of date night. Intentional time together. And I think this would be true if you've got a rocky relationship with a sibling, a brother or a sister that you don't talk to. Setting aside, I'm going to call them every Sunday after church, or I'm going to call them once a month on this day. If it's a relationship you want to start talking to them, setting that time. Yes. Because the first step is you're not going to improve in things if you're not talking together. So schedule a date night. His second suggestion on this one, if you're not communicating at all, is to repeat your wedding vows. So I'm going to read it because when you stood at the altar, you used words to enter into a covenant with your spouse and with God. You probably said something along the lines of, I take you to be my husband, to have and, well, if you're a guy, you would have said to be my wife. Yeah. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and health, till death, to love and to cherish till death do us part. We said vows like that. Then we had our own. I really liked our vows. Talk about powerful words. Those marriage vows catapulted you into the deepest communication 2 people can make to one another. Still, most people don't think much of the words from their wedding ceremony. after you've been pronounced husband and wife. It's not that you weren't committed. It's just that life happens. Going back to my friend's example of 2 roommates now, because you're both so busy. One of the best ways to keep your relationship fresh and strong is to remind yourselves of the words that came from your mouths on the day you became one. I'm wondering how that would be like, even just to, not just on your anniversary, but pulling out your wedding album and looking at the pictures together and talking about the day, reading the vows together, or going and having an actual yeah, Splendor would not be a recommended game. So I'm guessing it's from Susie. So there's a game called Splendor. And when Alex and I were just dating, we played, and one of our good friends was with us. He's like, no, it was after we got engaged. He finally said, he's like, I don't think you two will ever get divorced. I mean, if you ever do, I'm going to assume it's over the board game Splendor.
Well, it doesn't help that I learned how to play the game from you, which means I use the same tactics that you do, which means if I go first, I tend to do the things that you were going to do, which then frustrates you because I've done the thing you wanted to do.
Yep, I taught you well. So why not make a commitment to repeat them to each other every year on your anniversary dinner? Or take an opportunity to remind yourselves of the powerful union you spoke into being. Then make a fresh commitment to use your everyday words in a relationship that will support and continually breathe life into your relationship. And I think, again, both of these things are excellent, and they take both people wanting to invest in it. And you can just make those choices to do these things together. Yeah. So I think out of those 2 of them, I really like the regular date night is important. Okay. Communicate clearly. He uses he does a whole thing about irreconcilable differences and how does that really exist. I'm going to jump it. It's a neat. Essentially, he's saying that if both parties are working on it, we can always work together. So therefore, there should be no such thing as irreconcilable differences. Thank you. Here, this psychiatrist, Paul Tourier, a Swiss psychiatrist, said, irreconcilable differences is a myth invented by a jurist short of arguments in order to plead for divorce. It is likewise a common excuse people use in order to hide their own failings. I found that one really challenging. We can't get along because I'm ignoring my failings. It's likewise a common excuse for people to use in order to hide their own failings. I simply do not believe it exists. There is no emotional incompatibilities. There is misunderstandings and mistakes, however, which can be corrected where there is a willingness to do so. So I think we are unwilling to work on this anymore is more recognizable. Also, there's other things sometimes going on when a marriage breaks down. Infidelity, money issue. Like there's a lot of layers. The entire idea of irreconcilable differences is built on the illusion of incompatibility that has taken hold in our culture. Claiming incompatibility is like throwing down a get out of jail free card. Usually because the parties involved haven't done the work to keep it alive and thriving. So this again is going back to my idea at the beginning. This is where I was starting to go. I agree with you, but if one side is like, I'm done, I'm out of this marriage, and the other side is, let's work on this, the person trying to work on it can't fix things alone.
That's right. Very true.
And there has to be a place where you go, I can only own my half of this. I think that was my biggest problem with this chapter is he's speaking about some very specific situations, and I'm seeing some other nuanced gray areas where I wouldn't want somebody to feel guilty that they just need to keep working, because if somebody's walked away mentally, you can pray, and I believe God can do things that we can't, but it's not always just on you to try hard. Yeah, I thought that's what happened, Susie. Just a side note about Facebook comments. Okay. But you can make choices early in your relationship. You can choose that I'm not going to even plant the idea of divorce as an option in our marriage from the beginning. Alex and I had a joke phrase that we still use. This is our lifetime commitment. There's no takes backs, trades, exchanges,
Upgrades
or upgrades.
or returns.
Or returns, no returns. Which means if there's a conflict, we need to find ways to work through it. If you've ever seen a seedling of this phenomena taking root in your relationship, be intentional not to allow it to grow. Make a concerted effort to communicate clearly with your partner. You can get back to appreciating the differences that drew you together in the first place. Rekindling those feelings. And I'm starting to recognize we live in a society where we assume everybody gets married and falls in love, and that's what got them together. But I'm starting to recognize not every relationship is even built on mutual attraction or mutual appreciation. Sometimes it's motivated by security, other elements that can get in the way. And so maybe it's, God, help me to see something of value. What do you appreciate about this person? And starting with some prayers on that one. Looking for commonalities. The biggest reason you and your spouse have communication problems is that you expect your spouse to think like you do. Read my mind, Alex. You should just know what I'm thinking. That's impossible and unfair to my partner to, you should know why I'm upset.
Well, but for the more real world example for us, because we generally don't do the upset thing.
Right.
The more real world example for us is we have different conversations with different people, make plans, and then expect the other person to know what those plans are without actually necessarily communicating those plans to the other person. So there have been times where, well, didn't you remember I'm driving my parents to the airport? No, you didn't tell me that part. I wasn't aware that we were doing that.
So I planned us to be doing this with the car at the same time.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so by the way, then I'm actually doing this thing. Okay, I guess we'll have to rearrange this part of it. So those types of things where one of us makes plans with somebody else and just doesn't relay that information.
So this one's talking more like your partner doesn't think the way you do. When that doesn't happen, you think there's a problem, and there is. The problem is your unwillingness to humble yourself and work to see from your partner's perspective. And I've seen that. Like I've counseled a couple that Susie puts in, it's a good thing Stuart doesn't think like me. When they talked about, this is a couple that's no longer together, and when they talked about the situations, like this is the situation, and look at this next thing I did for them, and the other person's like, how could they even think this was what I wanted? Like they were talking, it was like they were talking about two drastically different events. And I try and try. Why do I bother even trying? They're not even putting in the effort. Like it was day and night. Like there was no common ground. There was no, well, have you considered what they're thinking? There's a cartoon image, and it's two people arguing, and on the floor is spray painted the number 6, or depending on the direction. So one's looking at it, and they're looking at it, and they're like, it's a 6, and the other person's looking at it from the other side, it's a 9, and that's like, that was what it was like talking to them, and neither person was able to go, wait, what are you reading? What are you seeing? So the smoke and mirror claim of incompatibility simply masks stubbornness or pride. Getting years into a relationship and saying we're too different to make it work is another way of saying we are not willing to change.
Mhm.
The first step to moving back towards compatibility is to start remind yourself of the times that you were in love with each other. Even in the as you begin creating some new commonalities between yourself. Identify some things that you enjoy doing together. So Alex and I have said we enjoy taking these walks together. We enjoy playing games together. This works for us. Dance class is another way that we find camaraderie. So starting a hobby, a shared hobby, or investing to understand their interests. So when this is an example outside of a marriage relationship, is when I moved back here, I would go to my football games with my dad. I knew nothing about CFL or football, and I still know very little. But I wanted to know, and I liked watching, and I liked going because I got to hang out and enjoy the thing my dad likes. Because he's awesome, and I wanted to connect with my dad. So sometimes there is that piece of, I'm going to learn about the thing you like. My friends, Pastor Jen and John, she was into scrapbooking, and he would come along and he would, she had this one tool where you would put these things through it, and it took quite an arm to crank it, and it would come out with die cuts. It's a die cut machine. And so they would watch a TV, and she would do her scrapbooking, and she'd be like, John, I need this die cut. And he loved it. He would roll it out for her. He wasn't into the craft side of it, but he was helping his wife do this thing she liked. So it's not just women go learn sports with your husband. Sometimes maybe guys come and do something like, I'm not saying go pick up a knitting bee or do a quilt, but there are ways to share or find something to do together. Do a puzzle. Reminisce about what's fun you've had in the past. Talk about new experiences you're having, books that you're reading, things that you're enjoying, finding a show or a type of show that you watch together. I personally like whodunits because then you can go like, well, why do you think this person did it? Alex and I have a whole theory on how to figure out who did it on a TV show. And I'm right 90% of the time.
At least.
Okay, if you don't, your marriage is going to grow stale. Your words will flow less freely, your communication will weaken, and you'll find yourself in a difficult, if not more difficult, relationship. I've already used this one. Identify unacceptable or acceptable and unacceptable words. I said the word of divorce, not even going to use it. It's not on the table. There might be other words that you are no-go words for your relationship. He doesn't give any examples, but maybe separation is a no-go word, or there are words that aid in communication. The last one is communicate clearly with love. No marriage can exist in perpetual harmony. This is a quote from Sir Alan Patrick Herbert. The concept of two people living together for 25 years without having a cross word suggests a lack of spirit, which is only admirable in sheep. It made me giggle. And since you are more than a sheep, arguments are inevitable. Conflict of some kind is inevitable, and the key is to work through them together, not to cover them up, not to just go with the fine, whatever. And there are some times where I know it annoys you. I'm like, okay, we've been arguing about this. I don't want to put any emotional energy in this. Let's just do it the way you suggested. I am putting a white flag up for the sake of peace, which sometimes annoys you because that's something we have to work on. But it depends on how we do it. And we're not going to talk about it now because we're going to move on. Sometimes I need to surrender the right to be right. I need to some things need to let it go. What are the hills you want to die on? And maybe some of the battles that we think matter don't matter as much as they do. And other times, we need to find ways to disagree and still like each other. Yeah, he says he and his wife Kelly, the majority of their fights aren't about big decisions, but over mundane nothingness. Over the years, I've learned that when it comes to arguing over small stuff, you have two choices. You can choose to be right, or you can choose to be happy. Humility is the underlying issue when it comes to surrendering your right to be right. When you're humble, you don't feel the need to come out on top all the time. You don't have to win every battle and admit that you are wrong. Next time your temper rising over something relatively insignificant, just pause and ask yourself, is this worth the fight? Yes, because the toilet paper has to go. That's not one we've actually had, is it?
Yeah.
And I think we've solved the toothpaste one by each having our own toothpaste tube.
Yes.
So, choose kindness. Be considerate of your spouse. And this goes beyond a spouse. Be like finding ways in relationships that matter to you to be kind and show kindness. He doesn't get into the love languages, but if you recognize quality time is what fills that person up, makes them hear your love, then spend quality time. If you recognize they give a lot of gifts, then maybe a well thought out gift is the way that you communicate to love. And sometimes that gift doesn't have to be a brand new thing. It could be the mittens you knit yourself. It could be the wood box you built for their collection. It could be a number of, so I've got two of them, acts of service, raking the lawn, doing the dishes, fixing the leaky something, taking the rotting pumpkin out. Oh, I love you so. Alex removed the gross pumpkin that had disintegrated on our mantle today because he loves me. Quality time. No, I've done that one. Physical touch, hugs, hand holding. I know one family, the husband is all about physical touch and she is like, nope, don't. And there are times she's like, sometimes when we're watching a movie, I'll go and I'll sit and I'll purposely hold his hand and he gets so happy. And halfway through the movie, I'm like, I can't do this much longer. But I do it because I love him. And words of encouragement. So any relationship that matters, that type of kindness matters. But he takes it another step. There's this ditty that underscores this. Two young lovers walking down the street. She trips and he's worried. Be careful, sweet. Now married, they walk this exact same street. But when she trips, he says, pick up your feet. Has the quality of your words deteriorated over the years? How you speak, has it gone from, would you like a cup of coffee, my love, to, you can get some, it's in the pot. And recognizing, like, I think one of the worst things television has done for us is sitcoms that thrive on the laughs that come from banter and sarcasm. The poking, the needling, the humor of it on the show, it looks witty and quippy and fun. But when it happens in real life, even if both parties mentally know it's a joke, there's a subconscious part that hears the words and they stick.
The Roseannes and the
like
Married with Children and all of those.
But even Friends, they quibble, and even the Cosbys, which I liked that show, or your other like wholesome afternoon, there'd be like just the poking funs. And yes, you need to be able to laugh at yourself together, but when it's the other side always doing that, we know of a couple And the first time you met them, like as long as I've known them, they always had that bantery, like, hey, ugly, like not quite that, but they always just picked at each other. And about a year into their relationship, you met them and you're like, do they even like each other? I can't tell. And when they hit their communication troubles, we noticed that the fun, quippy, bantery sarcasm was turning more and more malicious. And we were not surprised when the relationship ended later. Because that tone of language affected everything. And I see it not just in marriages, I see it in friendships, and I see it in workplaces, like things that wouldn't have been acceptable 10 years ago. Yes. Think twice before you speak, because your words influence will plant seeds of either success or failure in the minds of another. There it is. Napoleon Hill. No idea who that is, but words of wisdom. And I think that's why I'm like, anytime there is a comedy, the way people talk to each other actually hurts me. I don't do well with that type of jokes because I don't want to be talked to that way. And maybe I don't have thick enough skin. But I just also see it. That's how people get hurt. Because you can only take the picking for so long before it becomes your reality. Okay, so there was a study that supported this. A recent University of Denver study examined the speech habits of couples during their first and second decades of marriage. The results were interesting, but not surprising. Among the couples that ended up staying together, having successful marriages, less than 5% of the comments they made to one another were negative. But among the couples that later split up, twice as many of their comments, around 10%, were negative, usually forming in the form of biting personal remarks or put downs. And that's I think that's just showing us the reality of what we gave in those anecdotal ones. The study concludes that harsh words and insults in marriage can be cancerous cells that, if left unchecked, erode the relationship. And that will be true in any relationship that matters. Siblings often needle each other and pick on each other and point out your worst flaws. Like siblings, parents seem to know how to push our buttons the best. And we, in turn, can know the right thing to say that would just crush somebody's soul or build them up. Words that accompany an attitude of kindness also continue to reinforce it. For example, when you speak kind words to your spouse, they are more likely to reciprocate your effort. Not that they will. Me being kind does not guarantee somebody will be kind back. But repeated kindness often encourages kindness in return. So again, you making a change will not necessarily change the other person, but it can have a lasting effect. Here are two of the best, most effective ways you can use kind words to bolster the love of your relationship. Praise your spouse in public, telling other people the good that they do, sometimes in their hearing, sometimes not in their hearing. Tell stories about something great they did, like taking the gross pumpkin out. Like, oh my goodness, it was gross and he's amazing. And then avoid sarcasm and harsh words, even masked as jokes, which is the part that I just talked a lot about. So, any thoughts on improved marriages?
I was just going to say Napoleon Hill is a award-winning American novelist, and mostly in self-help and business novels.
Okay, well that makes sense.
He wrote a very famous book called Think and Grow Rich.
Never heard of it. Okay, so with children, some of these things, it's the same steps. we start by talking to our kids. We talk clearly with our kids. We talk clearly with our kids with love. And all of these, like speaking kindly to your kids, your children, your siblings, everyone matters. So let's see what other tidbits of wisdom he passed on. The first one is listen to your kids. So communication goes both ways. The Catherine Wallace said, listen earnestly to your children. Anything your children want to tell you, no matter what. If you don't listen eagerly to this little stuff when they are little, they won't tell you the big stuff when they are big. Because to them, all of it has always been big stuff. And I've been around kids, and there are times, especially if they're a talker, it can be hard. It can be challenging. I want to say Shindu. What's the comedian's name? Shindu.
No, Vindy or whatever.
Vindy. She makes like a comment. She's like, when you have small children, it is very, very hard. She's got an Indian accent. I can't do it just like she's actually Indian. And she's like, it is very, very hard because they just want to talk at you all the time. But there's no value added because everything they know, you've told them. But you got to listen to them when they explain to you like about science, like as a 3-year-old, or like about the cookies they ate that you're like, I just gave you that cookie, or the world they're building because they're writing a story. All of that matters to them. Their bobo matters to them. And it's true. Like I have parents that were like that, and I told them everything. So when I got into high school, I let them know that I was going to a party where there was going to be no adult supervision. And I didn't hide, like I didn't do things because I knew I would tell my parents about it. So, yeah, and even like there's like one or two really embarrassing, not like, oh, I was so embarrassed, but like I messed up in high school 2 or 3 times in big ways. And I confessed it to my parents. Like it wasn't like something that I hid for like years and years and years because I just told my parents stuff. Yeah, I love you too, Mom. And so I see that this works. Like I recognize it from my own parents' experience to me. Children are surprisingly observant, and they will know if you're listening or half listening. And as your child learn to use their language, engage them, encourage them. Nothing should be off limits. Side note, I also think if you have a young child and you're teaching them, use correct body parts and anatomy, because when something goes wrong, if something ever was to happen to them, having them know the right words for anatomy makes things clearer so that you can actually find out that there was that's another piece altogether, but just speak honestly with them. Yeah, because it matters. Because if something horrible happens, they're more likely to trust you and come to you and tell you the truth. So listening and believing matters. As you know by now, when you open your mouth, you are picking sides of life and death. Not only are you directing your own life towards one side or the other, but you are talking to other people, taking people with you. Nowhere is this truer than in your relationship with your children. The words you choose to say to them or withhold from them during their developmental years will influence how they interact throughout their lifetime. And not that, like, we are all doing the very best we can with what we know and have. But yes, so with that, speak words of encouragement. The word encourage literally means to fill someone's life with courage. Building into a child matters. And kids remember. He gives this story that's kind of heartbreaking. In high school, his best friend, was a football star. And junior year, he felt like he was being called into different things, more important things, wanted to put his focus in things. And his dad, in a very heated discussion, said something along the lines of, "You're just a quitter." Fast forward 20 years after hitting a major professional milestone, my friend and his dad were sitting down. When his dad offered congratulations for all that was going on in my friend's life, the first words sprung from his lips were, "Not bad for a quitter, eh, Dad?" His dad had no memory of the insult. And like, it's not just this kid. So Quentin Tarantino, he's known for a number of R-rated movies, the Kill Bills, there's just a number of movies he's done. He has done very well for himself in his life. He is considered a creative genius in certain circles. I recently read an article about him that he's never given money to his mom. And it all goes back to when he was a young kid. He got caught writing one of his short stories when he was supposed to be doing math or something. I don't quite remember the details. And she said something along the lines of, "You're not going to be famous from this story stuff, so stop wasting your time on it, blah, blah, blah. There's going to be none of this in your future, so get over it," or something like whatever she said. It was harsh enough that he said, "Fine, mommy," in his head. When I become famous, you're getting not a dime from me. And he's like in his 60s and he helped her with a few debts, he says, but she's never gotten a house from him. She's never gotten a car from him. She's never gotten anything. All because of a harsh word she said to him when he was being a bad student and she was trying to, I don't know, encourage him to do his work in the most unencouraging sort of way. Like, kids hold on to those things. I'm sure you can think of things a parent has said to you that really stuck. Or maybe just that striving to just live up to what they hope for and you never really heard the "I love you" or "you did good." A torn jacket soon mends, but hard words bruise the heart of a child. Similarly, many parents think that withholding praise, they're afraid, they're trying to protect their child from becoming spoiled. They're afraid that they spoil the child if they speak affirmation to them. But this is a fallacy. While you shouldn't pour empty or overwrought praises on your child, you should never neglect to affirm how important they are, how much they are loved, how well they are doing. Your silence doesn't make them stronger. It inhibits their healthy development. John Trent and Gary Smalley wrote a book called "The Blessing, Giving Gifts of Unconditional Love and Acceptance." And here's a quote from it. "For a child in search of blessing, silence communicates most confusion. Children who are left to fill in the blanks when it comes to what their parents think of them will often fail the test when it comes to feeling valuable and secure. Spoken or written words at least give children an indication that he or she is worthy of some attention. Good intentions aside, good words, spoken and written, and preferably both, are necessary to communicate genuine acceptance." So if you have a child, let them know you love them. Let them know they matter, they are of value. Write it down, put it in cards, sing it from the rooftop. No, don't necessarily sing it from the rooftops. Rooftops are going to get icy soon. Please don't fall to your death. Share the love deeply. God pours out his love on us, and we can learn a lot by doing the same. Loving encouragement. Never withhold clear, loving encouragement from your children. Keep those lines of communication open. Listen to them, listen to what they have to say, clearly speak words of life and encourage them. Oh, thanks, Mom. She just told me you matter and you are loved. I feel the same about you, Mommy. As you do those things, make sure you always communicate love and choose your response wisely. And like being direct, like so many things, like learning. This isn't in this chapter at all, but when you're watching kids play, like, and this might be for younger kids, but instead of just saying be safe, going, hey, I see you're climbing the tree. What's your plan for getting down? Where are you going? Like helping them to learning how to critically think. So like there's some neat resources I found online out there about that. Sometimes it's people posting on Facebook, and it just makes me go, every word can be intentional. When my sister was getting her license, I would say, watch your speed, be careful. And she's like, don't you trust me? I'm like, I trust you. It's all the other stupid drivers on the road. But at least I let her know, like, I value you. I think you're learning these skills, but you're not the only one on the road. Like, letting know why I'm telling you these things. Please call me. That's the one. Like, please call me that you've arrived safely, because I don't know who else is on the road tonight. Choose your words wisely. As you build open pathways of communication with children, there will inevitably come a time when they tell you something they've done or something they're struggling with that you don't like. At least you should hope this time comes. If it doesn't, they're just hiding those things from you. Be careful of the words you choose when you're upset. They have the ability to damage not only your child's psyche, but also the relationship between the two of you. Well, you may be disappointed in certain behavior. Being disappointed in your child's behavior and being disappointed in the child are two different things. Choose your words that reflect this reality. Make sure your child knows that just because they have done something that you don't like doesn't mean you love them any less. Their actions don't dictate your level of love and commitment to them. This is where a lot of parents trip up. They fail to separate behavior from child. And then the child feels like they are a disappointment, that I have let you down, I have lost your love. Once you speak disappointment to a child's identity, you can't take it back. I think that is true, and I think there's also a place where God's grace comes in. So, and we pray for God to help us in that. Is there anything else? Keep listening, keep responding well. No matter what they tell you, show them love. And if they tell you something that you're not ready for, be quiet. Like if they're telling you something, just listen. Don't. 2 ears to hear, 1 mouth to speak. Just be patient. Don't give your first reaction. I'm thinking about like the damage of teens that I've talked to who have told their parents that, like, a coming out, I'm LGBTQ, and the damage to the relationships, the psyche of those kids as they navigate the world. And now I've made a choice, or I've let my parents know something and it makes me unlovable. Like, that's heartbreaking. And I think it's heartbreaking for parents too. And I know that's hard, and there's a whole bunch of navigation in there of, I don't know how to respond. I know when one teen came out to her mom, this is my girlfriend. One of the things Mom had to grieve was, I always thought I was going to have a white wedding with you, and this, like, there were things that she had expected for her child that weren't going to look that way. And that child is now married to a woman. They did actually have not 1 white dress, but 2. But as a Christian woman, like, she just kind of really had to figure out, how do I show my child I still love you? And it's been an ongoing journey for that family. So Communicate clearly with love. And that's not just for our relationships with our spouses or our children. It's with our parents, it's with our neighbors, it's with our siblings. And I think there are relational truths that I said were for marriages or children in this chapter that work across the board. So thank you for hanging out with us tonight. We will be back hopefully next week. Developing an attitude of gratitude. So if you're not doing this, I'm going to challenge you this week. If you have a journal, put it in your journal. If you have a notebook that you could use, journaling is really just a way of capturing your thoughts. It's not necessarily a grade 5, dear diary, today I got a crush on a boy. He is so cute. Sorry, I keep banging the cart. It can be as simple as Tuesday, November 2nd. I forgot what day it was. The things I am thankful for today are, and 3 things. They could be the same 3 things yesterday. Lord, thank you, the sun is still shining. Thank you for hot tea. Thank you for my dog. Like whatever it is in your life that has blessed you that day. If this is your first time doing a project like this, try 3. If you want to really challenge yourself, go 7 or 10 every day. Just write them in your notebook this week. You can do it. I'll do it too. Like it's not just me arbitrarily handing out homework. I mean, I am handing out homework to all of us, but I will do it too. And I think there is something significant about my negativity goes down the more I remember all the good things happening in my life. I think that will be a true experience for you as well. So next week, developing an attitude of gratitude. Join us again for more tongue pierced. Good night.